And the Supreme Court here in the U.S. starts a new term today. The justices are expected to take up cases on major topics like conversion therapy, presidential authority, and birthright citizenship. It comes after a summer of legal battles on the Trump administration's policies. ABC News senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer has more.
President Trump has a remarkable winning streak at the U.S. Supreme Court, but will it last? As the justices take the bench this week to start a new term, major questions loom about the future of presidential power.
This is the Supreme Court term where we'll see whether there are limits to the court's view of executive power.
The court will decide whether Trump can fire members of independent federal agencies for any reason, despite 90 years of precedent saying he can't, and whether that authority extends to the Federal Reserve after Trump took unprecedented steps to remove Fed Governor Lisa Cook.
The Supreme Court has been very open to the president having full removal power for other agencies that are supposed to be within the executive branch.
The court also preparing to weigh in on the president's sweeping global tariffs, billions of dollars on the line.
If we didn't have tariffs, we would be a very poor nation.
As some American small businesses call them an illegal tax, putting their very survival at risk.
Tariffs and the consequences of all of this is going to basically wipe out the profit we thought we were going to make.
Hands off!
And with his order ending birthright citizenship still on hold, Trump wants the justices to decide the matter once and for all.
I think that some of the justices are eager to get to the merits on the birthright citizenship question because this is a very clean example of a president acting alone, trying to reinterpret the language of the 14th Amendment.
As the midterm election nears, the court will debate the legality of campaign spending limits and the use of race in drawing election maps, a high-stakes test for the Voting Rights Act with the balance of power in Congress potentially on the line.
If you effectively take away the protections of the Voting Rights Act, both before and after the election, you have effectively eliminated one of the most successful pieces of anti-discriminatory legislation in American history.
And with the nation sharply divided, the justices will again wade into the culture wars, deciding this term whether states can ban transgender athletes from school sports and whether state bans on so-called conversion therapy for LGBTQ teens violates a counselor's free speech.
The people who are seeking the services I provide are struggling. That is the ultimate impact of this law, is that I am not able to be helpful.
Now, legal experts say the justices to watch in many of these big cases are Justice Amy Coney Barrett and Chief Justice John Roberts. They're two conservatives, but two that are more inclined to find a moderate middle ground. And decisions, Diane, in all of those cases are expected sometime before the end of June 2026.
And Devin, the Supreme Court's already working this morning. So what's the latest on this new ruling?
Yeah, their first day on the bench, Diane, and right out of the gate releasing a dozens of pages orders report that included their final judgment now on the appeal of Ghislaine Maxwell, the co-conspirator of Jeffrey Epstein, who is serving that 20-year sentence. She had asked the justices to look at her conviction, her prosecution. She alleged that a non-prosecution agreement made with Jeffrey Epstein before his death should have applied to her, that she shouldn't have been prosecuted as well, but the justices declined to take up her appeal. They did not explain themselves, but a statement from Maxwell's attorney tells us that they are disappointed in the Supreme Court's decision, but they are going to be looking for other avenues to ensure, in their words, justice is done. Diane?
All right, Devin Dwyer, thank you. And you can see more of Devin's reporting tonight on ABC News Live Prime with Linsey Davis at 7 p.m. Eastern. And I want to bring in ABC News legal contributor James Sample for a little more analysis on all of this. Hi, James. So the Supreme Court so far has largely accommodated President Trump's assertions of sweeping presidential power. So what are you watching for on that this term?
Diane, it's good to be with you. That is an absolutely correct assessment. And if you think about today marks the 20th anniversary of Chief Justice Roberts taking his seat as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And one of the hallmarks of the Roberts Court has been the continual expansion of presidential executive power. The expansion of executive power does, in a zero-sum game, however, come at the expense of the role of Congress and the judicial branch. The question question really that you pose is the question, the central question, I think, that the justices will be returning to again and again this term in a variety of different contexts. And that question is, where, if anywhere, is the line for executive power? What is the outer boundary of presidential power? And over the 20 years of the Roberts Court, presidential power has expanded, even over the course of the 8-9 months of Donald Trump's presidency in 2025, and particularly including this summer and the shadow docket. Presidential power is on a winning streak, as Devin's report just indicated. It is almost undefeated. It is not quite undefeated. There have been 20 instances already this year in which the Supreme Court has struck down a lower court ruling that had temporarily, at least, restrained executive power. That is an extraordinary winning streak against only a couple of losses.
This court has already discarded precedent across major areas like affirmative action, agency powers, abortion. Does that tell you anything as they consider several cases this term involving relatively settled precedent?
Precedent is one of those questions that always comes up. You know, the notion of stare decisis, the matter has been decided. And the question with precedent is, you know, there are some precedents that deserve respect, and there are occasionally precedents in which the court admits later on that it got something wrong. That nobody asserts that precedent is always correct. Nobody asserts that precedent doesn't ever matter. The question is one of degree, and the question of degree is one of significant disagreement on the court itself. And so you listed a number of instances, but this coming term, there are a number of precedents that will be tested rather directly, including potentially the question of 127 years of precedent on the question of birthright citizenship, but that's far from alone. You think about the tariffs context and the extraordinary sweeping scope of the president's tariff initiative. Well, that's his interpretation of a statute that doesn't even mention the word tariffs. It's never been used for tariffs before in American history. That question will go to both the first exchange on executive power and the question of precedent. So precedent is a hugely important matter. And just a few short days ago, Justice Clarence Thomas gave public remarks in which he essentially said, precedent, not so much, not that important to him. There are other justices who disagree with that approach.
All right, James Sample, thank you.